Hi, I'm Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get On Board. And this is Women Get On Board in Conversation. Our goal with these video series is to help women business leaders elevate themselves in the boardroom. And we are delighted to have expert speakers to help them on their journey to lead with courage and confidence in the boardroom. Today, I'm pleased to speak to Mary Larson, a partner at MNP. And Mary's going to discuss EDI, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's a very broad topic. And I'm looking forward to speaking to Mary about what boards should be thinking about and what board leaders can do to make it a priority. Mary, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So let's start with a little bit about Mary. Tell us why you're here today and how you got here.
Well, how I got here, actually, that is a story of diversity and equity and inclusion in and of itself. I was the second class of women to go to Princeton, and I went to, during my time there, the ratio of women to men was 1 to 10. It did not mean that I had a lot of dating opportunities for a variety of reasons. But I worked in New York. I went to Stanford Business School, but over the years that I've been in business, I can tell you that things have changed enormously, but we're not there yet. And diversity, equity, inclusion goes so far beyond gender issues at this point. So I'm a partner at MNP, and I lead our strategy practice nationally. And in addition to doing strategic planning, there are 3 service lines that I have particular passion for. One of them is culture transformation. One is ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues, and the other is EDI, which is probably where I'm spending about 50% of my time right now. And EDI is part of the S dimension of ESG. So I have an incredible team that I work with. They have really deep expertise in the public sector, private sector, and academia. And the team itself is really diverse, which is interesting. We have racialized visible minorities, several other dimensions of self-identification, persons with disabilities, either visible or invisible, women and men who identify as non-binary, and others who are straight or queer. And we have people on the team of various ages. So we take our EDI very seriously with respect to our team and also within the firm of MNP itself. And I think it's fair to say that one of the things that we feel really strongly about with respect to EDI is that we have to think about it from a practical standpoint. This is not something ethereal. It is something that's a very practical concern. So we try to help our clients achieve practical solutions.
Well, thank you, Mary. That was really helpful background to sort of get into our conversations today. So maybe you can talk about the work you do on EDI with respect to how boards and executive teams can create a safe and very secure workplace to ensure that they belong.
Boards have a huge, I think, responsibility these days. And there are, when I think about it, there are at least 3 dimensions where boards need to think about what they're going to be doing with respect to EDI. One of them is the board itself. So you need to, I think boards need to look at their composition, not just from gender dimensions or racialized communities or equity deserving groups, but also diversity of experience. People talk about diversity of thought. I think diversity of experience is a little easier to get your head around. So people who represent different occupations and different academic experience could be very helpful. How the board behaves is really important as well. Are there microaggressions within the board? Are people listening to each other well is a really important issue. And the chair really has to be the arbiter of that, I think. Training and education, the board probably owes it to itself to make sure that it's getting trained. And then are the governance and nominating committee charters, the governance and nominating committee it's always good to look at the charter and what it's doing with respect to bringing on new board members and just making sure that the practices make sense. So that's kind of, let's look at ourselves, but what about oversight of the organization? I think there are a few things that I would be looking for if I were a board member. One of them would be, is there actually an EDI strategy? And does it link to the corporate strategy? And increasingly, corporations, non-for-profit organizations, public sector organizations are developing EDI strategies. And these are as rigorous as a corporate strategy would be. I would also be looking for some solid things. So is there an affirmation statement on the website? Is there an EDI committee that's actually doing things and that they report to the board regularly on the things that they're doing? Is the organization on a regular basis, maybe every year or 2 years, reviewing its hiring policies, its practices around hiring, promotion, and pay? And I think one of the most important things, have they done a demographic census? And these are really, really important because it's one of the things that allows an organization to figure out where they are, whether they're actually making progress. It provides an opportunity for people to feel like they're being heard, and properly done, we are, there's no risk of anybody's self-identification being brought out or anything. So that these are very powerful. And then the other thing that I would be looking for is, if I were on the board, is, every board has a dashboard of some sort. And I would want to be seeing some metrics that relate to EDI on that. So retention rates, progress on the demographic census. Are you actually making progress? Exit interviews, are there any reports of aggressions, things that might have happened? And one of the things, you and I both were involved in the Competent Boards course. And one of the things that we heard about was the importance of actually reporting on incidents. And so that's something that's important.
Mary, I want to pause for a moment because
Yeah,
that's a lot to unpack.
That's a lot. I know, it's a ton.
It sort of rolls up to ESG on the social element. And we had you in the fall time in our ESG speaker series with respect to social. So I guess the question, because we just had a speaker series yesterday and it was around ESG priorities and incentives and how you tie, and social measures were the highest linked to ESG incentives, to compensation, to manage. But I think the concrete elements that you're talking about are the types of metrics I would imagine you'd be working with management and boards on.
Yes.
Would
Yes.
that be?
Absolutely. And I think this point of being tying all this to compensation is extremely important. If you don't have these measures, what are you going to do? And that my next point was actually the reporting one. Because right now, if you look at sustainability reports, most of which are very fluffy and often written by marketing groups, which drives me around a tree, is that there's always an S section, and very often it's about planting trees or supporting schools, all of which is really good. But people are, shareholders are looking for the kinds of things I just talked about. It's data. Is there a strategy? Is there an information statement? Is the organization making progress? I think is really important.
Very tangible. Thank you, Mary. I recently read an article in Harvard Business Review. Is your board inclusive or just diverse? And they speak to ways that boards can move beyond representation. I welcome your thoughts on that.
Well, I kind of alluded to that a little at the very beginning when I was talking about behavior. And one of the things I think that has been proven out in research is that being the only one is really hard. If you're the only woman, if you're the only Indigenous person, if you're the only person who identifies as non-binary, it is very hard to be heard. And I think that increasingly it would be good if boards took a look at, given what it is that the company's trying to do, what kind of diversity makes the most sense? I mean, having one of everything is not probably relevant if you know, for every organization. And it might be for a bank, but they have lots of members on their board. So I think it's important to really think about how strategically can you get a board where everybody on it feels like their point of view can be heard. And this whole issue of really listening to one another and respecting one another. People have been talking about the tone of the top for a long, long time. So yes, and I think there's nothing worse than one of the things that we emphasize in our work is tokenism is just not what we want. This is not.
There's a quote, and you've heard this, the power of three. They said one woman on a board is the beginning.
Yes.
2 women on a board is presence, and 3 women on a board is a voice. Now apply that to any representation, right? So like you say, that tokenism, if you're that one voice, how do you get heard? How do you feel included, right? You know, I just thought that power of 3, be it women, be it whatever representation, it's lonely to be the only one.
It is. And the other thing I think to remember is there's this intersectionality. So, you know, where women get on board, that's what we are today, we're talking about. But you can have women who have other dimensions of diversity, visible, invisible disabilities, sexual orientation or identification. And so, you know, I think that it's terribly important to remember women are diverse as well.
That's my motto with Women Get on Board. We have a diversity of members across the country, with diverse in many dimensions. So there's a saying, it's very along the lines of what you were talking about, but diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice heard. Can you give any examples? I know you talked about already within your team, but can you give examples of organizations or companies that you've worked with that are really walking the talk, and you know, examples of how they can improve?
Well, there's one of our clients I kind of hold up as a poster child. It's not the only poster child, but it is a relatively small organization that kind of punches above its weight in terms of its impact on the community in which it sits. And they developed an EDI strategy with our help, and then they really started to tackle the things that needed to be tackled. So from a diversity standpoint, they've started recruiting and hiring. They're looking for people in different places than they used to. And it's hard to change. The organization is already quite diverse and I think quite inclusive, but they're just going the extra mile to make sure that anybody coming into the organization is looked far and wide. On an equity standpoint, they are doing a whole bunch of really nice things. They've all had training. They've spent a lot of time training with respect to Indigenous relations, but they're also now looking at themselves. So microaggressions, bias, that sort of thing, linking the training to their work. We're helping them with the demographic census so that they can get a sense of where they stand with the numbers. They've developed an affirmation statement. So, you know, that is very, very inclusive. And I think one of the most important things I'm seeing is that they're actually making their decisions about their sponsorships, the things that they do, the buildings that they build, and the other, you know, activities that they carry out with an EDI lens. So it's become part of the way they do business, which is really what it ought to be. They also have a really powerful set of KPIs and regular reporting at the board level. The board cares about this, which is fabulous. So there's kind of this partnership between the board members and management of the organization.
So nice to have kind of walk the talk and have examples of that. Interesting. I was on a call earlier in the week, and I was commenting amongst the group that it wasn't diverse. The average age in Canada is 62 for TSX listed companies. And I looked around, and a lot of us in the room were that age and beyond. And I said, I think boards need to have a younger demographic on the board. And the comment that I got back, which was quite interesting, was, well, they don't have the right experience. We need to have very experienced people on the board. And I sort of paused and I didn't go any further, Mary, but I think it's incumbent upon us to build those capabilities. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
That's a really interesting point. And I was actually speaking to the senior leadership group at one of Canada's top universities yesterday. And they were talking, just with respect to EDI, the fact that younger people just take this for granted. So there's one dimension on which it's important for boards to have this point of view that, why are you worrying about this? Why are you threatened by it? This is just life. And I think you're absolutely right that it is incumbent upon us. I think one of the things that organizations like ICD is undertaking to do, and is to make sure that they are proactively providing courses and materials and classes and certifications for younger people and Indigenous board candidates and members of other minorities. So I think the institutions are recognizing this, and I think you're absolutely right. It's just.
I also think it's a mindset that others need to open up, because you know what? You don't have to have the smartest around the table always, right? Wisdom is good. So we won't go further on that. And I know we're kind of coming up to the end and we could continue our conversation all afternoon, Mary, but what would be some of the key takeaways you'd like our listeners, our viewers today to go away with?
Well, there are a few things. First of all, having strategic and EDI strategy is a really good thing. I think about 40% of organizations in Canada, most of them governmental, have put together some sort of EDI plan, but there's 60% who haven't. So, some people feel like the university I was talking to yesterday felt that they were behind it. So no, you just start somewhere. It's good, better to start. And the other thing is to not be afraid of this. I think everybody is concerned about making mistakes. I do, clients do. And agreeing on common language is a good place to start, but the language is changing every day. So we don't use BIPOC anymore. So, I have a struggle keeping up. I think one of the most important thing is that if you can't do anything unless you actually uncover the barriers. So that is why you do demographic census. It's why you actually look for engagement surveys and see what's going on. And one of the things that we've learned is that, and I think it's just human nature, if people feel like they're being heard, that is a first great step. And then I think one last thing, it would be kind of always good for your organization to reflect as much as possible the communities in which you serve. And I'm going to leave on kind of a negative note, which is over time, as a board member, you will be held accountable for this, just as you will be held accountable inside of ESG.
Well, you know what? That goes with kind of, we know we've both taken the Competent Board's ESG designation is to be stewards of the future.
Exactly.
And lean in and be very mindful of your fiduciary duty. And all of those elements make you more effective as a director and better performance from a company perspective, from a sustainability for sure. So Mary, where can our audience find you and learn more about your work at MMP on EDI?
Well, the first thing would be my email address, which is really easy. It's mary.larson@mnp.ca. We also have launched we have an EDI landing page and a whole bunch of articles, especially by one of my fabulous colleagues, Sandra Puchis. And we also have a Practically Speaking site where we've put together a number of articles and guidelines and guidebooks basically on EDI. And so very practical ways of thinking about diversity and equity and inclusion that you could find there. So I'd love to have you invite you to that. It's Practically Speaking.
And on the LinkedIn, a lot of our members can.
Yes, LinkedIn and Women Get on Boards. Absolutely. Sorry, Deborah.
Hey, that's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. And yes, through Women Get On Boards,
Or
absolutely.
through LinkedIn. This is
And through
great.
LinkedIn, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for this edition of Women Get On Board in Conversation. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with our Women Get On Board community. To find more resources for your board journey or to join Women Get On Board, which we are now more than 850 members, diverse across the country, you can go to womengetonboard.ca. You can follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.